All right, and we're good to start again.
Start from Knox being at the castle, when he enters the castle.
Okay. The siege of St Andrew's Castle lasted for 18 months or so, and during that time Knox took refuge there because he became very alarmed that he might be taken prisoner as Wishart had been and suffer the same fate as he did, that's to say being burned at the stake. So he takes refuge in the castle, and it's when he's there that he is called to the ministry. What I mean by that is that the assembled congregation, the people who had taken refuge in the castle, decide that it is John Knox who is the best man to do the job of ministering to their spiritual and pastoral needs. And after much agonizing, and Knox describes this in some detail in his History of the Reformation in Scotland, which has some dimensions of an autobiography as well as an account of the Reformation. He goes into this in some detail in his history, and it was clearly the most important moment in his early life. This sense of being called by the congregation, but also being called by God. That this wasn't just his congregation calling him, it was God's will that he should take up the mantle of a preacher and, as he saw it, a prophet. And his very first sermon was on verses from the book of Daniel. And it's very much in an apocalyptic vein, by which I mean he accepted the very common Protestant idea that they were living in the last days of the world, that the conflict that they were engaged in with Catholicism heralded the end of time, the second coming, and so on. So that there's a degree of urgency, dynamism about it. They're fighting Christ's fight against the Antichrist. And Knox's first sermon is on that precise theme. He identifies the papacy as anti-Christian, and he develops ideas of Protestant theology, but also of godly behaviour that is aimed at replacing that Catholic viewpoint with a emphatically Protestant one. So right from the start, you get the impression of Knox as a fairly radical, scripture-based Protestant who has gone, whose views are not what you might call moderate in the way that many English Protestants' views were at that time. He goes over to a much more radical view, much more scripture-based view of Protestantism. I'll just carry on. You all right with this so far?
Yes.